My name is Adrian Nantchev, and this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. So today I'm joined with Scott Santens to talk about what he's doing. So please, Scott, please, tell the world, tell the audience at home, who are you, what is it you're doing, what do you believe in, and what difference are you making in the world?
About me, well, a lot of people know me through my writing about the idea of a basic income. And so this is an idea that I got into back in 2013. And I got into it actually through a conversation, discussion thread on Reddit. It was this conversation that hit the front page about how really people have no idea how quickly technology is advancing and what that means. So this discussion thread had some really great examples in this that even surprised me. And I thought I was someone who was quite on top of things as far as technology goes. And I was surprised to find that there were already self-driving trucks operating in mines, in Rio Tinto mines in New Zealand. And so these are giant trucks that are carrying ore that are driving themselves. This is back in 2013. The intent was, of course, to fully automate these mines, especially the trucks, by 2020. So the goal of this stuff, of course, is to eliminate essentially all labor. So these mines should be entirely automated. The trucks are automated. The drilling is automated. You transport to, say, the ports are automated. The ports themselves are automated. The boats are automated. The point is to get rid of all this labor as much as we can. And, that's great. We should be automating as much labor as we can. But the thing is, it's happening so quickly and people have no idea just how much automation is happening that society itself isn't really keeping up, and especially politics and government. They're not keeping up. The politicians don't even, for the most part, have any clue that this stuff is going on. Now, recently this discussion has picked up, thankfully, in the past few years, and hopefully that's even partially because of what I've been doing. But this is a discussion that we really need to have. And, of course, part of this is, what decisions do we need to make so that this automation that has been happening and is going to increasingly happen, what changes do we need to make so that these things are net positives instead of negative for people? Because for the most part, technology actually has been only accruing, the benefits have been accruing to those who own this technology. It's been going to the top. Productivity decoupled from wages and salaries decades ago, back in the mid-'70s. And so these wages and salaries have been stagnant for almost everybody else, and this growth is going at the top. And so this also is we've seen this in these kind of results like Brexit in the election of Trump, where we've got like these people who are being left behind are these you can't just ignore them. These are people that are hurting, and the way that we've set things up are not benefiting everybody. So this got me thinking about, say, this direction that we're going in. It seems like there's a T or a Y in the road ahead where we can go one direction or the other, but there's no status quo continuing to go forward. And because of this and because of technology, it's like we've got a utopian and a dystopian scenario ahead of us. If we continue and if we don't make the necessary changes that we need to make, well, they're going to have a whole lot more unemployment. We're going to have more poverty. We're going to have greater inequality. This could lead to like social breakdown. I think we're already seeing these kinds of things with the opioid epidemic in the U.S. As well. We're going to see more of that. This is the kind of decision that we have to make so what if we don't want that? What if we want this technology to work for all of us? What if we look at, say, unemployment as not the problem, but actually the solution? What if it's a good thing? What if we actually reorient so that full unemployment is our goal instead of full employment? What if we want to accelerate and incentivize automation? We want to eliminate as much labor as we can. Well, we have to make sure that we decouple income from work in order to do that. We have to make sure that people earn an income regardless of any work that they do. And that is a basic income. That's this idea of an unconditional income floor that everyone receives an amount sufficient to cover their basic needs as a starting point each month. And then you get a job and you earn that money on top of your basic income. And so this idea, when I started looking into it a few years ago, it was new to me. I was surprised to learn the stuff. I was surprised that we had already this has already been experimented with both in the U.S. and Canada in the 70s. I was surprised to learn that Nixon had almost passed a version of it where it had actually been proposed by Nixon and it passed the House of Representatives but did not pass through the Senate. That surprised me. I was surprised to find that we had experimented in cities across the U.S. like Seattle and Denver and New Jersey and Gary, Indiana and North Carolina and Iowa. I was surprised about all this, and I was surprised to be what the results were. I was fascinated to see that when Canada experimented with this in Dauphin, this entire city of Dauphin, Manitoba, received this negative income tax version of a basic income guarantee. And so they eliminated poverty in this town. And the results were they found later that, say, hospitalization rates had decreased 8.5% is one thing. They found that education rates increased, that kids actually who had dropped out went back to school. They had found that new mothers essentially treated it as paid maternity leave, that they were able to actually stay home with their newborns and instead of being forced to go back to work early. So there's a lot of these positive outcomes in Dauphin. There are a lot of positive outcomes in the American experiments as well. And it was fascinating to learn about these things. And then I also learned that there had been full UBI experiments in places like India and Namibia already as well. Looking into those, again, it was fascinating to see that you saw increases like self-employment is a big thing that really fascinated me, that in Namibia, self-employment jumped 301%, and then in India, those receiving basic income, those villages were 3 times as likely to start their own business than those in control villages that did not receive it. And it's that kind of thing that really got me thinking as well as, not only is this an idea for the future, which is what originally got me into it, but this is actually an idea that we should have implemented decades ago because of all these positive effects that come from it, and we could see right now. We could see a healthier society right now. We could see more entrepreneurship, more small businesses right now, better educational outcomes. It's crazy how kids raised in poverty, like this is something that it affects the structure of their brains such that there's less surface area for white matter and gray matter, and this also affects their results in various tests. And if you compare that to those with money, with sufficient incomes, then those deficits and those go away. It's these kind of things that our society is built around this like lack of basic needs being met, and the result of that is so much of what we see around us. So when I started really looking into this, I realized that this is something that's extremely important, and so then I decided to essentially devote my life to making sure that this happened. I think it's extremely important. It needs to happen as soon as possible. So I felt that anything I was doing that wasn't helping that goal happen faster was something that it was not worth my time. It's just every moment I need to be focused on this. So with that decision, I started up my own blog. I started writing about it. I was a moderator, became a moderator on the basic income subreddit. I've helped with that. When I joined, it was a few hundred people who were subscribers, and now there's over 40,000 subscribers. My goal has been to advance the discussion worldwide and also inform the discussion, because when I first got into this, like there were so many articles out there that seemed that they should be talking about basic income but didn't. It was almost like the author had no idea it existed, or they felt that there was no point in talking about it because it was just some kind of way out there idea. I felt that there was like this vacuum that needed to be filled, that someone needed to be out there writing these articles about basic income from all these different angles, because essentially, like, there's so much out there that I think is directly connected to basic income that so many people don't see. So that has been my goal for years now, to really deepen this conversation and really inform it and connect it to all these various ideas and observations. So, like, one observation, say recently, it's like you're seeing this kind of death of retail, and people will look at that and go, oh, well, that's like Amazon is killing off these brick and mortar businesses. Well, that is part of it, but also part of it too is that consumer demand has been falling. People have not, this discretionary incomes are falling for decades. And so people traditionally, decades ago too, were turning to various forms of debt. So you had, you had credit card growth, and then people used their houses essentially as ways to come up with this additional income that they were losing because of these stagnant wages that have been for so long. So it's this loss of demand that is really actually affecting the American economy and even economies all over the world, this kind of just stagnant growth. When you have a consumer economy in the U.S., 70% of this is built around consumption, then people unable to purchase anything means that those businesses go out of business. And then when those businesses go out of business, then of course those workers that had paychecks now no longer have those paychecks to spend into the economy, and therefore it's this downward spiral. And this is what we've been seeing. So I do not think that we'd be seeing the same death of retail that we would if we already had a basic income. I also think that we would not see the negative effects on small town Main Street USA that we've seen too. Like Walmart was devastating to these small town economies, and Amazon is continuing that. But at the same time, I think if actually people had basic incomes, then they would be able to have these smaller stores. They'd have these shops in like the Main Street USA, and everyone in these towns would have incomes in order to be consumers for these shops. And so that's one of these kind of side this is like a consumer driven or consumer demand driven argument for basic income that still is not really widely talked about. In the US, it's really mostly still like a technology looking at the future kind of thing. But there really are a lot of reasons to do a basic income right now. So I'll just continue on just for a bit. So this decision that I was going to go into this full bore led me to think, okay, is there a way that I could crowdfund my own basic income right now to start living with a basic income, so that not only would I be writing about it, but having one would enable me to know more about it, and I could show as an example of what a basic income can do. So in late 2014, I started my Patreon page, and the goal there was to crowdfund a basic income of $1,000 per month, which is, I decided on that because in the U.S. the poverty line is $12,000 a year. So a basic income I think would be $1,000 a month. And once I reached that goal, then anything over that amount I would pledge to anyone making the same pledge. So the goal there was to crowdfund even multiple crowdfunds. And so once I got that basic income, then it would stay at $1,000, and that would be my floor. So every month, on the first of every month, I would start that month with $1,000 instead of zero. And then, of course, I could earn whatever I want to do on top of that, or I could choose not to earn on top of that as well. And so that process took all of 2015. And in 2016, in January of 2016, is when I started receiving my basic income. And so I've had a basic income now since January of 2016. Every month, first of the month, $1,000. And because of that, I've learned actually quite a few new things about basic income that is kind of, if you're just looking at it from this kind of academic angle, you miss. One of those things was that just how important security is, just kind of that feeling of security. This is something that I even felt in the process of doing it. So you don't even need $1,000 a month to feel more security. I started feeling it like around $300 to $400 per month. Because at that point, it's like, well, I'm not going to starve to death. I've got enough money for food, and I've got enough money to almost cover my rent. And that, knowing that really made a difference as far as this no longer need to like worry or stress out about this, because that was like, I knew that was going to be there. And with that knowledge, it's like that's something that people don't get. And so it's with a crowd fund, it's actually it's a stronger sense of security than, say, like when people say they feel job security. Let's see, if you have a job, then you have an employer, and that means like one person can fire you, or that job could be automated and then you lose that job, or they could downsize and you lose that job, or the company could go out of business, they could lose that income. And so even if you feel that you have job security, it could be actually somewhat illusionary. With my crowdfunded basic income, you could say that I have like 350 bosses, but they don't necessarily boss me around. They're just, if they decide to quit, if they decide to fire me or whatever by removing their pledge, then it's like I lose, say, $5 per month. I don't lose $1,000 per month. So just that the fact that it's spread out means that there's a lot greater security. So you could also even see like a basic income by the U.S., that would be essentially a crowdfunded basic income where 300 million people are paying for it. You've got 300 million patrons. Would be like this taxpayer funded basic income. So that's like much more secure. That's what I feel like those on Social Security feel. That's actually a good name for it, where it's Social Security. It's this feeling of security, which means that you don't feel like this chronic stress. And people can even feel that too if they're receiving, say, let's say you earn $12,000 a year, but your incomes are varying heavily, like month to month or even week to week. That could be very stressful, even though your income is the same as someone earning the same amount. And that's actually what we're seeing. Actually, is like this transformation of the human labor market. Part of that is that we've been going away from these 30-year, 40-hour per week jobs or / careers, and we've been going towards this more on-demand labor force, where it's more alternative work, it's part-time, it's temporary, it's gig labor, it's contractual, it's the 1099 economy. This is the kind of work where your income do vary a lot. And so that's what people have been feeling, is this kind of greater insecurity from these variance in incomes. And so again, like a basic income there would make a huge difference, because everyone would know that at least they've got enough to cover their basics, and then their variance in income would be on top of that. So they'd just be, better off one month and much better off the next month and better off, next month. So that's just one of those things that I've learned along the way from just having my own basic income. But another thing I think is really important too that I've learned is that I'm able to focus on what I feel is most important, which is this. It's writing about basic income. It's talking about basic income. It's accelerating this conversation. It's informing the conversation. That's something that's important to me. I'm intrinsically motivated to do this work. I don't need money in order to do it. I just need money to actually cover my basics so that I can focus on this. So part of this is like, it's less important to me to say write an article that I sell for, say, $500 or something. Like, especially if I lose like ownership rights to it. Let's say if I sell an article for $500 and part of the deal is that I'm not allowed to republish that anywhere for a year. Whereas if I chose to publish it for free, then I own the rights to it, and I can put like a Creative Commons license on it. I can encourage people to share it with a Creative Commons license, and basically more people can read it. So on the one hand, I sell it for $500. I'm $500 better off, and say 100,000 people read it. Or I can write it for free and do Creative Commons licensing. It's out there in the Commons, and it's republished multiple places, and 1 million people or 2 million people or 5 million people or whatever read it. The more people who read my stuff, the better. I'm happy with that. So in a way, money is less important to me because I'm more focused on the results of my work. That's what's important to me. Like, the work is my own, it's motivation. And that's really the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, is this difference between doing something because you want to do it, it has its own value, and doing something because in exchange for receiving something, you'll do it, like with money. That's extrinsic motivation. So with basic income, I feel that's very strongly that you'd see a difference there where people would be less extrinsically motivated. You'd see people more able to do the work that they feel passionate about, that they feel that they really want to do. And I think that really is kind of a very different society, even considering that in the US, 1/3 of those with jobs are actually engaged by them. 2/3 of people are actively disengaged or disengaged by them. So you've got so many people doing jobs that they have no interest in doing. They're only doing it for money. And so if you introduce a basic income, then that can really switch this around. You can get people choosing to do the work that they are most passionate about, and I feel that's the best work to be done. And you can actually discontinue all this work that does not need to be done. Like, how many people are doing work that they're only doing for money, that they don't really feel any passion for, and that don't even need to exist, that machines could do that work, or it doesn't even need to exist at all. I think there's a lot of work out there like that. And also there's this effect where if you enable people to say no to work, if you enable people to refuse work and do their own thing, then that actually will switch the incentives to the employer. So if an employer wants someone to do some low demand work that people don't want to do, then they'll need to pay more for people to do that work. And so one effect is that you'd see higher wages and salaries for jobs that people don't like. On the other hand, if that wage and salary goes above the level to automate that job, then you're incentivizing automation. So then people who don't want to do that job, they don't need to worry about it anymore. Now robots can do that job, machines can do that job. And so again, that's another positive outcome of this, is that would be an incentive for automation versus a continuance of people essentially underbidding each other in order to prevent a machine from doing that job because they need it. That's one of the effects that we've seen of this growth of technology for decades, is that people are effectively bidding against each other. They're saying, I need some sort of income, so I'll do that job for $7 an hour. And someone else says, well, I really need income too. I'll do that job for $6 an hour. So we're pushing down on wages over time. And as we do that, of course, technology is always getting cheaper and cheaper, but we're continually lowering the bar for human labor. We want to switch that around. We want that bar to start raising so that people say, no, I'm not going to do that job unless you pay me this much. And then if technology is cheaper, great, technology can do that. So there's just so many aspects to this that I've been learning about and focused on and writing about, and it's been quite a journey.
All right, Scott. Well, a lot of notes, a lot of questions and queries. Fascinating, yeah. You said at the beginning that towards like utopia or dystopia, I think technology-wise, technology has always been pushing forward. Like in the 1800s, 19th century, we had the Luddites in England, the self-employed, what were they, wool weavers, cotton weavers, destroying machinery that was owned by the factories and the landowners because it was taking away their jobs. And I think technology will always be on the rise with regards to automation and productivity. As productivity increases, it frees up our time. And 1971 when Nixon decoupled the dollar from the gold, then productivity and wages were decoupled, and then it starts to go on this massive spiral where CEOs are paid up to 382 times the workers, as opposed to back then it was 20 times the wage. That's fascinating. I'm just going through my notes here. I took a lot of stuff down. One thing, you talked about actually Canada and North Carolina and Idaho, doing the UBI. Iowa. All right.
Yeah, and it was a negative income tax back then.
Yeah. What was the result of that? It's back then, but clearly that's not the case today. What was the results from these places?
Yeah, so the American income maintenance experiments were done in the 70s, and they focused on both metro and rural. So that's why they did cities and various rural areas. They wanted to compare those. They were really only basically focused on work disincentive effects, because that was the main concern, is if we do this, will people stop working? So that was the main concern. So then they varied the rates. So, they tried 100% poverty line. They tried, below the poverty line. They tried above the poverty line. So they varied the different amounts. And they also varied the clawback ratios. So you'd have like clawback ratios of 50% and clawback ratios of more than that and less than that. They wanted to see, what is kind of the sweet spot for the amount given and how quickly that amount is taken away with earned income. And that also is the difference between a negative income tax and a universal basic income, is that a negative income tax looks at how much you're earning from employment and other income and then varies the amount according to that. Whereas a universal basic income gives everybody the same flat amount and then varies the amount of taxes on the income you earn on top of it. So the net effect can be actually identical. The net effect of, say, if you look at a flat tax funded basic income with, say, a 40% flat tax rate versus a negative income tax with a 40% clawback rate, those would be exactly the same net outcomes. People would have the same outcomes after the fact. They just have one person would receive more in basic income, and they'd have less after taxes from the rest, and then the other one would have, less negative income tax, but they'd keep more of their income from, after taxes.
On the surface of it, just purely hearing about it for the first time, I can't help but think that a negative income tax rate may be slightly better.
Yeah. So there's there's certainly an argument to be had there, and I think that, after having looked at this and studied this, I prefer a UBI, but I would certainly, I'm not against a negative income tax because, again, they have the same theoretical outcomes. What the differences are, where the differences come into play, is that, again, I think that the biggest thing is that if we had done this back then, I think that would have worked out great. The thing is that because we've been transforming the way that we work, and again, it goes back to that income variance. So you require the calculation to be, of course, correct when it comes to negative income tax. So let's say you've got some heavy income variance to the point where your income varies by 50% month to month. So you have to estimate in advance what your income is going to be the next month in order to get the proper negative income tax payment. So it's very possible that you would say estimate incorrectly, especially since we're going to be estimating for like 300 million people or whatever who are recipients, in the U.S. Then let's say the negative income tax is calculated to be $500 for this month. And it turns out that your estimate was incorrect and you actually required $800 that month. So you were essentially $300 short. And with that $300, without that $300, then let's say you're not able to pay your rent, or maybe you fall behind on some other bill. And so this can lead to these downward spirals just from like one incorrect estimation. With a universal basic income, because you get the $1,000, you're not calculating in advance. It's just that's the flat payment. The calculation isn't on the back end. And so you already know what your incomes were throughout the year, and then you're paying after the end of the fact, looking backwards, and so then you calculate it correctly. So I think that's really the biggest kind of selling point, I feel, for a UBI versus a NIT. But another thing, too, is just it's more of a perceptual thing. And so this could be, because it's a perceptual thing, that could be what makes a NIT superior to UBI, let's say in the U.S. Maybe like the electorate would decide that they don't like the idea of people getting money if they don't need it per se. If you're earning enough, then you shouldn't get anything. You should be calculated so that you limit that. So that could be something more popular. But on the other hand, a negative income tax, because there's definite net payers and definite net receivers, then it also plays into this idea of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you're saying, well, the rich are definitely getting taxed, and those in like the lower quintiles are the ones receiving it. And so it's a naked redistribution. And so some people might not like that. Maybe they would actually be much more likely to like, say, the way Alaska does it, which is the closest example in the world to universal basic income, because everyone in Alaska receives about $1,000 a year on average and has since 1982. So everyone in Alaska, rich or poor, even adult or child, gets this amount. It's totally universal. And because of that, they do not see it in any way as welfare. They see it as, their dividend. It's their right, that they have like a birthright to in Alaska, it's like the oil. And so it's because of that universality, there's no stigma attached, and there's no, like as they say, programs for the poor are poor programs. If you create a program that's specifically designed to only help poor people, then everyone not receiving it can actually turn against it or not like the idea. A universal basic income gets rid of that by making sure that everybody gets it. It's by its full universality means that there is no stigma attached to it. And because even the rich receive it, then they don't have anything to complain about, even though they are net payers after the fact, after taxes. So again, they're still paying the same amount, but it's just not as apparent as it would be, to just see your taxes, taken out and not get anything in return. So that's another kind of selling point to it.
Yeah, all right, interesting, because I actually felt that with a negative income tax, or a NIT as you called it, that there would be less paperwork, less bureaucracy. By the way you described it with regard to calculating, the fluctuations every month, it's actually the opposite, probably more so. So interesting case for the UBI, but also I'm very interested. You mentioned earlier that this patent you had on a blog, that if you had to put Creative Commons on it, only a few amount of people, 10,000, I can't remember the number, would purchase it and consume it. Whereas if you got rid of that Creative Commons, got rid of it in general, or put a Creative Commons 0, a lot more than 10,000 would consume it. Are you like suggesting that a UBI would disrupt patent laws or make it irrelevant? Or yes, can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah. So this is something again that I I felt that there was kind of a theoretical possibility for this before I started receiving it, but after receiving it, I feel more strongly about this. And so my example there was that when you write something or create something or whatever, and you sell it to someone, a lot of times you sell the right to it, and so then that person or company has that right. Like, I thought it was really weird that I've written a few articles where I had to ask permission to republish it somewhere else, even though I was the author. And it just seems so weird that why am I asking permission to share what I've written in a different place? That just seems weird to me now, especially. So I think that our intellectual property system has evolved in this environment that is missing a basic income. And so because you never know, because there's that insecurity of income, you never know what's going to happen, you were able to go from the system that started out with, say, a 10-year monopoly on this stuff. Say the government says, okay, you created this, you should have your own monopoly on this for a limited amount of time, and then it will be released into the public domain, and then everybody can use it how they want to. That was the original setup. Over time, it's sort of these copyright extensions and patents that have happened. And so I think Disney is a really good example of this, where Disney, because of Mickey Mouse, has wanted to protect that over and over again. And so they are the ones that are mostly responsible for lobbying for and getting these copyright extensions, passed, so that they could maintain Mickey Mouse, the monopoly over Mickey Mouse as their intellectual property. And so, now it's past like the 100 years. It's way past the death of the person who created something. Walt Disney is long dead, but Mickey Mouse belongs to this company where they get to lobby over it. They spend money for this, and then people, I feel people who they've agreed to this because, let's say if you have a copyright on a book, and you would get income for it because of that for 20 years. Well, then Disney comes along and says, hey, well, what if you were able to get that for 100 years? Wouldn't you rather prefer that? Because you don't know, what's going to happen. And so you're like, oh, well, sure. That's where Disney gets you, is that these companies, that it's the companies and corporations who are mostly benefiting from these extensions. It's not ordinary people. It's not your everyday like author and creator and stuff. It's these companies that benefit way more than everybody else. So everybody else has gone along with it because of this sense of kind of insecurity of they're needing money. And so I feel that once you no longer need money to live because you already have it to start with each month, then you're more likely to care less about the fact that a copyright exists for 120 years. Say, why would you do that? Just like what I'm doing is I don't care about publishing I don't care about publishing something under copyright if it means that, if you publish a book, then it requires money to buy that book. And so, sure, a lot of people can read it, but a lot more people can read it when it's free. We live in a time when you can copy something a limited amount of times and distribute it with zero cost across the entire world. And I think it's a much richer society when everybody has access to this information instead of it being locked up. And I think even there's it's a big difference between like Bill Gates and the founder of like the open source movement, with GNU, and I can't remember exactly what those letters were, but I recommend people look at both of those letters. Where Bill Gates wrote a famous letter where he was essentially defending ownership of software, and that you're stealing by copying and sharing the software. And on the other hand, you had this letter talking about how this information should not be locked up, that it should be free and shared, and that's where the value is from. And so I'm agreeing with the latter. I think open source, public domain, this is the way the information should be utilized and propagated in the 21st century.
There was a guy that advocated open source information and software, Jim Stillman or JS something or other. Initials of JS. Mm-hmm. I believe he passed away like in 2012. I'm not too sure. Does that sound familiar at all?
No, I'm not familiar.
All right, okay.
With that death. The name sounds familiar. I think I know what you're talking about, but
yeah, but I just can't remember what his name was. But these papers do sound familiar, but I can't remember who Bill wrote the letters to. But nonetheless, my main concern stemming from all of this, and my main argument against UBI is that let's say you get £1,000 a month for as UBI in general, £1,000 staple. Then if you're already employed at, say, £1,100 a month in a job X, and you understand that there's an alternative out there, which is UBI, and that's UBI's free money, and you don't have to go to work, no commuting, nothing like that, no reporting to boss, etc., etc. He's then leaving the workforce and then going on the UBI. And now the dilemma then means is that the more people that will recognise this much alternative, they're going to jump on this bandwagon, some would say, and that would then say that the cost of the UBI as a debt to the company, for example, on the 20 trillion, for example, that's going to go up. More people are going to go onto it because they're de-incentivized from working.
Right. Okay.
What's your say to this?
Yeah. So that's a very common response, and really the important thing is to recognize that it's almost like a confusion or not looking at the current system. So the current system does exactly that. It incentivizes exactly that, because what it says is that if you have a job, let's say it's $1,500, and let's say you could get $1,000 per month in welfare, then maybe there's what is the incentive of earning that extra $500 per month in a job that you dislike and you hate? So let's say you choose to go on welfare, and so then you're on welfare, and in order to get off of welfare, you need to find a job that you both like and that pays enough in order for that to make sense. So then suddenly you need to have like a $3,000 or $4,000 a month job or something like that. And then when you do that, then of course your benefits are clawed away, which is actually the effect of that is a high marginal tax rate. So, and this can actually, it's often around 80%, and it can even exceed 100%. These are what are called welfare cliffs. This is when welfare programs are stacked on top of each other, and then by let's say you're the working poor, you're receiving different benefit programs, you get a $1,000 per month raise, and you're rewarded by losing $5,000 per month per year in benefits. And so that's these cliffs. Well, so basic income removes that disincentive, because now if let's say you go back and you're that $1,500 per month job person, well, with the basic income you're at $2,500 per month. If you were to stop working, you would lose $1,500 instead of, the difference is $1,500 instead of $500. With a basic income, all work is incentivized because you always earn more than you do not working. If you start off with $1,000 per month, and you say, oh, well, I think I will accept that part-time job, or that job that I don't necessarily like that much, but I'll do it because I'll do it for that extra income. And so then you accept that, and let's say now you're getting that $1,000 per month, and so you're at $2,000 a month total. And in the existing system right now, you could go from $1,000 per month not working to $1,000 per month working, and you'd have $0 extra more. So that's the huge disincentive is under the existing system. UBI corrects that by removing that disincentive. So it does actually increase incentives. That's actually exactly why Finland is experimenting with it. That's the hypothesis in Finland, is that they feel that the existing system disincentivizes especially taking of like part-time and temporary work. So, why would you take that part-time job, or why would you accept a 6-month contract if afterwards you're going to go right back onto the system? Or by taking that job, you lose those benefits, so that's, of course, you're not better off. With the basic income in Finland, they're thinking, okay, if you keep it with work because you don't lose it, then all work adds to it, in which case you are incentivized to take that part-time job, or you're incentivized to take that job that's only 6 months, because even though it's only 6 months and you may just fall back onto the basic income afterwards, then at least you got that 6 months worth and it was worth it. And also there's no, that administration and that bureaucracy is gone. You're not going through this churn that exists right now, where you fill out all this paperwork and then you are told to like jump through these hoops and here and there, in order to get this benefit. And that's actually, again, if you look at this change in the way that we work, we built a system that's built around this old way of working. Our new way of working is people going in and out of jobs, and they're going, multiple jobs at the same time. They're going from here to there. You want to actually make that a kind of a fluid process. You don't want a sticky kind of benefit system. You don't want this process of like a month to get on benefits, and then you have to report this and report that, and you have to go here to take this class and go here or whatever. Like, if you just give people money and let them decide what to do with it, and don't have all of these tests involved, then that is a much more fluid process. You just you get the job, you're off the job. You get another job, you're out of that job. That's the way that's I think what makes UBI this a key component of, say, 21st century system, because we are working in these much different ways than we used to.
Yeah, interesting. I see your point, but I feel that my argument against myself just then would have been, it's down to the employer to then provide better working conditions, or better hours or things like that to keep the workforce on. Otherwise, you then got to go through the hassle of setting up the infrastructure of automation.
Yeah, that's exactly what I feel. That's a positive. That if we set it up so that businesses decide. This is also why I feel that basic income is a great alternative to minimum wage laws, because minimum wage laws say that an employer must pay this amount minimum no matter what, and they have to do that, of course, because people will work for poverty wages. They will say, because I need something, I'll work for $5 an hour. And someone will say, no, I'll work for $4 an hour. It's this bid to the bottom. So then the state comes in and distorts the labor market by saying that, okay, here's this artificial floor that's $15 per month, let's say. $15 an hour. And, everyone has to pay this no matter what the way the work, number of employers, anything. But with the basic income, then the incentive moves to the employer. So employer, if you're an employer and you're offering, say, high demand jobs that people really want, why should you have to pay this, $15 an hour for a job that people would really want to do for less than that, even for free? And if you're an employer that has low demand work for offer, this is jobs that people don't want to do, then those are the jobs that should pay more, like supply and demand. If with low demand, that should actually require more money. These jobs that people don't want to do, these dirty jobs, these jobs that people just, draining their souls, that's the money, that's the jobs that should pay more. And so if it takes, say, $20 an hour to get someone to flip burgers under a system without a minimum wage and basic income instead, then if the machine to a burger flipping bot costs $12 an hour, then boom, that makes more sense. Now you can automate that job, and the burger flipping bot is a much better deal. But as long as you've got a minimum wage in place, then it's distorting these labor markets and it's distorting these decisions that would be made otherwise.
Yeah, it puts a cost on their labour.
Right.
Now, I'm also very curious, maybe it's the elephant in the room, I don't know, but funding.
Mm-hmm.
How would you go about giving everyone in the States 1,000, 1,500 a month? And my own other concern with it is that if the government is giving you this money, then some would say you're giving them the power to tell you, if such institutions exist, that they can dictate to you what you can or cannot spend that money on.
Yeah.
What's the catch, some would say. So how are you funding it, and what's the catch?
Okay, so I'll start with the second one first. And so, this is a unconditional basic income. That's the great power of this, is that there are no conditions. Again, you have to compare it to the current system. And right now, the government has all these strings attached to it. You have to, say, go to the reporting office or whatever once every month and prove that you're looking for work, or you have to take a class here, and then you get food stamps and you're not allowed to spend it on alcohol or seafood, or there's all this whole list of things that is approved and disapproved. And so that's the government dictating all of these decisions that it should not have the power to dictate. An unconditional basic income is the government. It's essentially like a Social Security check. It's saying, here's money. You can spend that money any way you want to. It's cash. Cash can be used any way you want to. And so then the government has no power to do that. The government does not have the power to tell seniors how to use their Social Security checks. And I would also argue that out of the entire population of the U.S., it's the seniors population that appears to have the most power over government. And I think that's because they vote in large numbers. Why do they vote in large numbers? Well, they're not having to worry as much about employment because they're retired. They have more time to engage in, informing, reading, volunteering. They're just more engaged citizens. And because of that, I think, the government is essentially afraid of them. If look at like Medicare and Medicare D or whatever. So seniors already had Medicare, and yet they still got Medicare D. So they got even more. And so if government was somehow controlling or had greater control over seniors because they were giving seniors Social Security, then that never should have happened. Like, they should actually have seniors in their pockets under the hypothesis that it increases control by government. But it's the other way around. Seniors are the ones with government in their pockets because they're the ones who vote. And that's really what it comes down to, is that if you want to be in control of government, you have to be voting. You have to be engaged. You have to be an informed citizen. You got to be part of the process. You have to be part of democracy. It's an active thing. It's not a passive thing. And seniors are active. So I think it's actually important for basic income to actually improve democracy, because people should have this money that government is not dictating to them how to use it, and they should be able and more empowered to be more engaged citizens. I think a basic income will enable people to do more volunteer work, to have more time, to read more, to be more informed about the issues and these kind of things. So that's my argument for the concern that it would somehow, grant government more power or whatever. I think it's the opposite. As for how to pay for it, so this is this is actually something that a lot of people misunderstand right off the bat. So I'll try to explain this in a deeper way. A universal basic income can be confusing to people because they'll immediately do the math in their heads and say, okay, well, $1,000 a month times 300 million people is $3 trillion. So that's hugely expensive and it's impossible. Well, what they forget from that is that there are people paying into it. Everybody is paying in and everybody's getting out too. It's almost like everybody is getting it's like a universal tax credit, but it's a refundable tax credit. So some people will be paying $200 to receive their $1,000 a month. Some people will be paying $1,000 to be receiving their $1,000 a month. Some people will be paying $5,000 a month to be receiving their $1,000 a month. So you have to subtract that out. You have to figure out what is the net transfer from top to bottom. If you just imagine the person who is receiving $12,000 in basic income and paying $12,000 in taxes for it, then that's zero. The cost for that person is zero. And the cost of everybody on the other side of that, everybody who is a net payer, the cost to give them is basic income is zero because they're essentially paying for their own basic incomes. So to figure out the cost of basic income requires looking at the net benefit for those who are net recipients. So you have to figure out how much is it that people are receiving in total after paying taxes. Only those who are doing zero work whatsoever, and not zero work, but zero income, who are earning zero income whatsoever, then they get the full basic income amount. And then it's like the negative income tax. As you earn more, that net transfer reduces, which is why negative income tax is essentially the same cost as a UBI, depending on the funding mechanism. So the way I've calculated this is that the net transfer from the top to the bottom it's actually a net transfer from the top 40% to the bottom 60% is about $900 billion, not $3 trillion. And so that is the net transfer, not subtracting out all the programs that would no longer need to exist fully or even partially. So that goes into how you choose to fund it, as in which tax credits do you get rid of, which tax expenditures and tax subsidies and tax allowances. What about various welfare programs like TANF and WIC and SNAP and Section 8? All of these programs that exist that we need to look at and say, do we still need this with basic income? Does it make more sense to replace this stuff with basic income? And also there's these partial replacements that you could do too, which is I would advise for like Social Security is a good example. Social Security is a little bit tricky because, of course, you don't want to take $1,500 away per month that someone is receiving and give them $1,000 a month in return and say, there you go. No, it doesn't make any sense to do that. And if you give people the choice, let's say of Social Security or basic income, then that's an improvement. But then there's still people who are seniors who are no better off, with basic income. They would just be getting, the same thing. So I think that it makes sense to actually do kind of a partial elimination of Social Security, where you could shrink it by about a third. So with that way, if someone was receiving $1,500 a month in Social Security, then they would start receiving $1,000 a month in Social Security, and that would be in addition to their $1,000 a month of basic income. So now they'd be receiving a total of $2,000 a month in income per month as their starting point versus $1,500 under Social Security. So they're $500 better off. That example would be. So if we do that, if we do like a partial elimination where you transfer some of the Social Security funds into the basic income pool, then that reduces the cost as well. So after all this, after all these tax code simplifications and welfare program eliminations, we're looking at a cost of around $300 to $600 billion, depending on those choices that we make. And so I think that helps a lot as far as deciding, how are we going to fund it, because it's a much smaller amount than people think it is.
So essentially, just rearranging the entire welfare structure, a replacement, arguably. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and not only the welfare system, but the tax code too. It's a very important part of this, is that because we do so much, I would argue, welfare through the tax code, that we don't even see it that way. If we're giving someone a tax credit, for doing this or doing that, or for meeting this requirement or that requirement, then it's essentially the same thing. If you get $5,000 off your taxes, then it's the same thing as not lowering your taxes and giving you $5,000 cash. And so there's so much simplification that can be done in the tax code through UBI.
Well, fascinating. Very interesting topic. But Scott, as we wrap this up, as we bring it to a close, what are you working on now exactly, and what is the best way for the audience to get in touch with you?
Sure. So the best way to get in touch with me is, through my Twitter, twitter.com/Scott Santens. My Patreon is patreon.com/Scott Santens. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/Scott Santens. You can reach out to me through all those avenues. It's the best way to follow, what I'm writing at any point. I'm constantly publishing something else. I'm also recently on Steemit, which is an interesting new platform that I would even recommend people just check out. That would be a whole other conversation because it involves like cryptocurrency and everything. But you can find me on there. And as far as current projects, well, I'm focused right now on helping build this movement. I'm one of the co-founders of US Big, which is a 501c3 nonprofit founded here in the U.S. to expand the conversation and discussion for basic income and reform it here in the U.S. So people can check out usbig.net to learn more about that. And I'm also involved with the Economic Security Project. I suggest people look at that. The Economic Security Project was founded, actually one of the co-founders of Facebook, Chris Hughes, also Natalie Foster and Dorian Warren. And this is they got together, about $10 million to help fund various projects in the U.S. to, again, further this discussion and advance and accelerate this in the U.S., figure out exactly how to go about it, help with think tanks, and also move the zeitgeist forward. I think it's imperative that we get, people doing podcasts talking about UBI, get it in our fiction. We need it in TV and movies. We need stories told about it. It needs to be more personal. It's been very academic for decades, and it's still very much academic. It needs to be part of the cultural zeitgeist. It needs to be something that everybody is talking about. So many people still don't even know what it is. They never heard about it. They confuse it with, say, living wage. They think that it's some kind of minimum wage, or they think that it's some kind of, paying everybody the same thing no matter what job they do. There's a lot of, just from hearing about it, people may think they know what it is, and there's a lot of, people just don't. There's a lot of awareness that needs to be spread, and I think that's really key, and that's what I've been focusing on. Is that I think that is the biggest challenge and the biggest obstacle at this point is just making sure that everybody knows what it is and knows at least some of the depths of it as well. Instead of just even hearing about it, but how does it work? How can we fund it? Really get into this as far as, which programs should we eliminate? Which programs should we keep? How high should it be? Let's get into the details of this argument. Let's get into the nitty-gritty instead of just, arguing about if it's a good idea or not. I think it needs to be much deeper than that, and I think it needs to happen faster because, again, technology is coming quickly. Technology grows at exponential rates, and we're getting towards that point where people are going to really start getting surprised by the stuff that's happening, and there's just no keeping up with that, via typical methods.
Fascinating. Before we go, I must talk to you about the fiction side. I'm curious about that, but we'll just end the show right now. Thanks a lot, Scott, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always happy to talk.
Thanks a lot. And ladies and gentlemen, viewers at home, if you haven't already, if you're on YouTube, click on the subscribe button below and press the bell notification right next to it. And also, if you're on Steam or Steemit and listening to this, upvote this, re-Steam, and follow. There's plenty more to come. How cool is that?